Hi, welcome to another episode of the podcast and also my YouTube channel. So today we have quite a special topic. I also want this episode to be kind of like a best friend chit chat, unlike some of the previous solo episode, which is quite structured. Like I just came back from a 1 week of video production, and also before that, I traveled for quite a bit in both in the East Coast and the West Coast. And I came back from both of those experiences, and I thought, it's time to have a little chit chat with you, my audience, about this topic about time. So backtrack a little bit. As some of you know, if you follow me since 2022, you probably know that at the end of 2022, I took the whole December off and to basically travel around a couple countries around the world, you can say. And also, completely did not work. Not only did I not work, I was not checking emails, and I did not have my laptop with me. So even back then, there were people who were amazed how I could do it, including people who are other fellow creatives, other fellow coaches, and other fellow consultants. And I came back and got right into it for work. And I remember I kind of said that I would do an episode on this topic, but I sort of didn't. Then after quarter one, I was like planning for travel again, and I went away in May, and I thought this time, yes, this is the time that to do episode on time. Uh, and the topic that I want to specifically with time, what I want to address is how is it possible to plan for breaks, and also if you are multifaceted. Passionate creatives that you have multiple links, how is it possible to like plan for extended period the whole for your creative projects or a project that takes you elsewhere, kind of like my video production project last week. This is especially, I think, useful for people who identify themselves as parallel universes in my four archetypes of creative career. If you haven't taken the quiz, I highly recommend you, which looks at like what shape of creative career that you're prone to. Lots of my audience I know are fall under that parallel universe paradigm, and also the constellations paradigms, which we love doing multiple things in our career. That's just who we are, and we've been developing different things that sometimes ask us to switch from one link to another or one focus to another temporarily. So how do we design our schedule and time that allow for that? So as I said at the beginning, like I don't want this to be like a lesson. This is more of just kind of sharing my perspective. And of course, I wouldn't help it. I would wear my coach hat and give some advice and raise some questions. But I also just really want to hear your perspective as well, because when it comes to with time and energy, there's no like one cookie cutter answer. Let's start with that. There's no one single rule, no one single time hack in the world, or no single software that will completely take care of our time issue. And it is practice. It is also something that requires intentionality. So if you listen to my previous episode where I talk about how to a balance between structure and freedom, you know that I'm a fan of planning to 80% and I'm leave 20% for spontaneity. And that ratio works for me. It might not work for you. So just bear that in mind as I tell you how I've been able to like design time off for extended period of time or do remote flex time working, and also talk about how I can like take time for like an extended project, like in my case, doing a video production project. At the end of this like sharing, I also want to share some observations I make when I was traveling and talking to people, and I got quite a bit of insights and got like some eureka moments as well about like how we are collectively going to work regardless of whether you're creative. So stay tuned for that part as well. So let's talk about how did I do it? How was I able to take a month off in December, and then how was I able to then like also travel for 3 weeks essentially in May? Um, Part of it that I think if I were to sum up my experience or my trick, quote unquote, in two key parts, is the equation is basically flexible planning plus permission. Once again, flexible planning plus permission. What does that mean? Let's start with flexible planning. So it would be I would be lying to you that there's no planning that goes into it, and I would never kind of try to advise people just go with the flow. Whenever you want to like take a break, do that. For lots of us who run our creative business or practice, or we are have like multiple clients, we have obligations, we have a job, we cannot do that, right? And especially like if you have a job and then you have vacation day, then you might feel a little bit better because that's what the company have given to you as your off time. But especially if you're running your creative thing and you're a freelancer, self-employed, business owner, planning is the key there when you want to take a break or extended break. And the everybody does some level of planning, right? But the way that I plan is quite specific. I don't do week to I do some level of week to week planning, but when I think about how to plan ahead and have foresight in my calendar, I do quarterly planning. Meaning, if you were to take a peek at my uh, calendar or productivity, I use this task management system called ClickUp, and where you can kind of customize and look at like whether you want to plan for the week, plan for the year, or plan for the month. I do it so that it's planned for the quarter. So I list out all my goals for the quarter, and then I also list out like what's like most important to achieve and what's nice to achieve. And I put down like when I'm like imagining that I will take a break. So when I was doing that for like when I was projecting that I would take a break in December, I make that decision in June 2022. So half a year ahead, I already knew December I'm going to take completely off for December. When I was like trying to take a break in May, this time it's not as like extensive, and I was kind of sort of still checking my emails and like doing flex working. That I did not plan that in January, right? Like not half year ahead, but I did think about that and plan that in my schedule 3 months ahead. So what happens when you have like that kind of foresight and planning ahead is that like it gives you ample of time to communicate to the people that you work with as well. Um, Lots of people ask me like, how do your clients agree to this? Like, did they need to take like were they did they have any kind of reaction, or did like like what if are they not worried that you dropped the ball on something? The way to make them not worry is to actively inform them way ahead of time, ahead of what you think would be ahead of time. So, what I mean by that is like at a job, you might give like, I don't know, 2 weeks or month notice that you're going to take vacation, depending on company policy. In my case, because I knew half a year ahead that I decide to take a month off in December, I told them a half a year ahead, or maybe 5 months ahead, maybe 1 month after I make the decision, I told them. And the way that I communicated that is that, for obviously for clients that the work will wrap up by them, there is no issue. But for those who I am on a retainer contract for, I've communicated to them that like let's talk about it. Let's talk about how like the work would not like their work would not be impacted when I'm away. So essentially, I'm there to lay the foundation so that the machine or the work is still running if they deem necessary during the time that I'm away. And that takes pre-planning once again. To give a concrete example, I'm a fundraising consultant, so taking a month off in December is actually quite critical because that's usually when like people make year-end donation asks. And with my biggest clients for fundraising, I because I told them half a year ahead, Also, this client is amazing value aligned client, and we just so that work ahead so that like by the time November hits, we've got everything scheduled for our year end ask and all the grants already finished. So when I went on my trip, I did not think about of like the work at all because I knew that it was taken care of and we had a good plan in place. So that's what pre-planning looked like. And obviously, like there's some like the reason that I call it flexible planning is that like I'm not so rigid, like I'm not putting rigidity into like I must like accomplish this even when I'm going on break, or I'm like I must like finish all these things before like I go on break. There is like some flexibility this time around, especially when I'm like doing flex working, but also some flexibility because I am looking ahead for 2 quarter or 1 quarter. So like with my with the December break, I would say like because it's a month off and it was like international travel, definitely there was like more firm rigidity around the boundary. Like I really had to like finish certain things by a certain time. Where with the May this time when I'm taking a mid-year break, I was like okay with like certain things being more flexible. Uh, and I was okay with the uncertainty that maybe some things will still come up. But nevertheless, I still gave like people notice. I still hold space. Like people could not book calls. Like as you know, like normally people can book discovery call with me. By the beginning of April, I was announcing that on my Instagram that I was closing my discovery call for for 2 months. So there was a lot of like steps that I took to do that kind of pre-planning. But all of this planning would not have mattered, or rather, I would not have taken so much action to plan for it had I not give myself the permission to take a break. So this is why the second piece of the puzzle is actually permission. And the permission does not come from someone else, it comes from you. And this is best illustrated with the context of like if you do work with clients or projects, right? Because even when like someone is asking me like how did your client allow you to do that, for me it's a very straight clear answer of like, well, I don't ask them for permission because they're not my boss. I'm their contractor, or I'm their like they hire me as a consultant or coach or video producer. I'm giving them way ahead notice because in my business, I decided like this time to this time, I'm taking a break. And you see how that attitude is very different from you showing up to the client and go, oh, I really need a break. Can I have a break, please? This is where like is you are asking for external validation or permission rather than like you already make the decision, you're informing them and you're working towards a plan how to make it happen. Energy is very, very different there. Obviously, what I just said like does not apply if you have a employer, if a job, and that is a totally different case. Hopefully, in that case, you have like set vacation day and you have a good policy in place in your workplace that you can just give reasonable notice and take the days off. It is with like again creative self-employers, freelancers, creative solopreneur that the permission piece is so key. Because if you don't give yourself permission to break, no one else would like volunteer their hand up and say it's time for you to break. It's time for you to take a vacation. Nobody is your boss. No one is like even if there are people working for you, it's not their responsibility to do that. And if we don't give ourselves permission, that's when the burnout cycle starts all over again. I mean, I've talked a lot about working from a survival mode. If you haven't listened to that series of episodes, it's in the podcast. You can check it out. And this idea of giving ourselves that permission to pause, permission to take break, and understanding that when we do come back, we will show up like so much more with so much more energy, and it is essential as both a personal activity and a business or work activity that we take time off is an important mindset, I think, for us to bear in mind when we work independently. So for those of you who are wondering, how did Betty make that happen? The first step before all the planning even happened, planning is just logistics. The first step is that ask yourself, are you able to give yourself that permission to break? And if you can't, like, if the first thing you do is not like take a month off like I did, can you give yourself a permission to do a mini retreat this quarter or next month or this summer? Leverage the time that you have with the summer weather. If would be hard pressed to believe that you can't find 2 days in your schedule. If a client says to me, I literally cannot find 2 days in my schedule, I would like to, I think my next thing would be exploring to them, show me your schedule. I really think the issue is the mental permission or the mindset permission rather than the actual time. I've talked many times that time is elastic. The way that we prioritize time is becomes the way that we perceive time over time. I know there was a lot of time in that one sentence, but I think that you know what I mean. So right now, as you're listening to this episode, I want you to take a second and just ask yourself, when would you give yourself permission to take a break? When would you give yourself permission to show up with full confidence and have your own back that you deserve that break so that your energy with the client when you communicate or with a project, whoever or the person that contract you, whoever that might be, you're not asking them permission. You're communicating to them a decision that's already made. All right? As we go through this piece about time, I do want to remind you that I'm officially now launching my first ever group coaching program, the Conscious Creatives Group Coaching Program. This is exactly for that group of creatives that I've been talking about in this episode. The group that I would call accidental creative solopreneurs or accidental self-employed creators. What do I mean by that? Lots of us who are creatives or artists or however we want to identify ourselves in our creative endeavor, we accidentally became the business owner of our practice. We might have started out as creative freelancers, hopping gig to gig. And then once we got some traction, we actually now need to have some kind of structure and some intention to manage our time, manage what we offer as services, and be able to be clear about our goals, our mission, and our purpose so that we are not just falling prey for the aimless hustle. Because we know burnout is just 1 or 2 mile away. If we keep saying yes, or we keep just like work, 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 and go, 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 then we are just hustling without any creative fulfillment and purpose. So people who are in these buckets, like I mean, I've come from like as a creative business owner, I know the pain in this stage where we don't yet see ourselves, and we might never want to see ourselves as like an organization or business owner per se, but we are no longer also just a creative freelancer because the amount of like the time that we spend building our practice and the amount of work that we've gotten require us to show up with intentionality and clarity. So I've designed this program so that it's an intimate 4 to 6 people program over between the month of September to December. We're going to meet bi-weekly, and we're going to walk through the different dimensions that would support us to design intentionality in our creative practice. And everyone who participate in this program will walk out from the program with a 1 year conscious growth plan for 2024 and better decision making muscle and clarity in how to navigate the currents of our creative practice. But because, as you know, the enduring practice, a sustainable practice, we will always have ebbs and flow. What grounds us is our core, our ability to make decisions when uncertainty shows up. So if this is you, I'm starting to book discovery calls for inquiring about the conscious creative group coaching program. There's also an early sign up bonus for getting an additional one-on-one coaching call with me if you sign up in the month of July. So please uh, check out the program. I will leave the website in the show notes. And there is a bit of an application form to fill out, very short. This is really for me to understand whether you are a good fit for the program. And I'm really hoping to create this group so that like really conscious that it is a conscious group of creators to co-hold a climate that's supportive of each other, and there is like knowledge and energy sharing and exchange in this intimate setting. So again, the website is in the show notes. I can't wait to meet you. So back to this topic about traveling in time. So as I said, like being able to take a break or being able to go on a creative project is really about flexible planning with some foresight and permission. Sounds pretty easy, right? I know it's straightforward, but not easy. I do want to share some of my observations that I've made on my travel because I think these observations will also help us or motivate us rather to continue to build this intentionality, whether it's about intentional break, intentional time design, intentional like boost of our curiosity by traveling as we venture into the future of our career. Two key observations that I make on this trip. One is that more and more I notice that people have a greater collective consensus. I'm pretty sure the pandemic played a pretty big factor in this, that life is bigger than work. I'm going to repeat that. Life is bigger than work. Remember when I came back from December trip and the first thing that I said was literally the first post that I make was that like, I, what would how would we so how would we show up if work is not everything? How would that change our mindset and the way that we show up to work? And I think that is already in everybody's collective conscious and it's not going away anytime soon. I noticed this because this time in Vancouver, I for those of you who don't know, I spent my high school years in Vancouver, and so I have some really good high school friends there. And let's just say our high school friends are pretty a bunch of overachievers. I remember like we used to like our school is full of overachievers. We got like a lot of ambitious people and lots of successful people in different like areas of like career. And for a bunch of overachievers, when we gather, like the topic often around the first question that everybody used to ask each other is like, "What do you do nowadays?" And this time, I noticed that when we gather, the first thing that people ask each other instead of "What do you do nowadays?" is "How are you doing? How are you living your life? What do you like to do outside work now?" Tons of questions that like I frankly I was surprised because I was ready to like explain my this like multifaceted yet sometimes can be confusing kind of like business to people, but no one asked what I was up to. I didn't ask what they were up to either. It just kind of like obviously naturally flow and came out in the conversation, but that was not the center of our topic. The center of the topic become, where do you want to live in the future? Or like, is this, are you settling in the city and like, do you enjoy the life there? I really think that this value shift that people are putting online is a healthy one. And I wish to see that stay, and I think it will, especially having seen the impact of pandemic on our mental health and impact of like lots of people burning out because of their job. So life is bigger than work. So which brings me to the question, why are you waiting to give yourself a break? Why are you waiting on taking on that trip that you've always dreamed about? The second thing that I want to share is that multi-link passion is also something that is getting normalized. I also discovered this in conversations with friends. You know, when we graduated, everybody was pursuing like different lane, and we all pretty much like was pursuing a label. Like, are you going to be a lawyer? Are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be a filmmaker? Are you going to be a nonprofit manager? At earlier in my state, like as you know, I've always been a multifaceted person, so it's not unusual for me when earlier in my career when I introduce myself, people get confused, or they might make a comment, "Oh, you're so multi-talented," but it's still confused what I do. I'm totally okay with that. But this time, what I noticed, again, before I even share what I'm up to, people are sharing with me that, like, during the pandemic, they really had an epiphany that their main vocation is not sufficient, or it's not providing the same fulfillment they used to be. And so they did this other thing, or then they opened up this other creative interest, or they started teaching or doing this and that. And people are really enjoying this multi-linked passion or having different embracing a different facet of themselves, which is fascinating to me. So this is a call out to those of you who identify multi-passionate. Our time has come. I really don't think that multi-linked passion is going to go away. In fact, I think people having a couple slashes in their uh, linking title, you know what I'm talking about, right? Filmmaker slash coach slash consultant. I think that kind of combo identification for our profession is going to be the norm. And if that's going to be the norm, once again, we need to prepare ourselves to embrace or give ourselves the permission to embrace the multifacetedness within us. So, in order to hold space for different things that we are passionate about, we need to be that much more intentional about our time. We need to be able to say no. We need to be able to show up with permission that already given to ourselves to say, well, actually, next week I'm going to go to a visual arts trip in the. I'm going to go to paint in the nature, and that's one of my personal project. So let's finish out this project that we have in hand this week. A bit of a, like a makeup example there, as you can hear, but you know what I mean. I really hope that all of us are creating this world or creating this new norm that we get to be more and more of ourselves and more creative fulfilled and thrive in our practice that way and enjoy our life, enjoy our creative practice rather than that old narrative of submitting ourselves to the aimless hustle. So that's it for today's episode. As I told you, this is more like a best friend chit chat rather than um, knowledge sharing. Lots of what I share, I think, will have some application in your own practice, I hope. But what I want more than like me sitting here and recording and sharing with you is you sharing back with me. So please reach out to me and share what's your take on time. And when are you planning to take a break this year? What's your next adventure? Have you noticed that kind of value shift among your friend group as well? I'm so curious and I look forward to hearing from you.